H.P. Lovecraft once said the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. And the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Not knowing what's going to happen next is at once both thrilling and terrifying. Unfortunately, it can only happen once per experience, mainly because on subsequent visits, we already know what is going to happen. Sometimes, however, a story will burrow into your psyche. No matter how hard you try to forget it, it sinks its hooks into you and it will not let go. Rod Serling, creator of the groundbreaking series The Twilight Zone, was a master of producing stories that would stay with you long after the story was over. And almost 70 years on, his stories are still discussed as if they had just aired the night before. These are those rare stories that alter your perceptions of reality. On television, it is a little easier to pull such a feat off with the help of carefully selected music and lighting and whatnot. But for a comic to pull off the same feat requires talent that is not often seen. For a story to create that fear, especially after you know how it's going to end, that's the mark of sheer genius. Today, we're going to tune into some of the most unsettling, haunting, heartbreaking, and hilarious stories I've come across in a long time. So, grab your favorite drink, get some comfy clothes, put on your headphones, and tune in to Midnight Radio. Hello, and welcome again to The Graphic Reader. I'm Nathan, and I'm so glad to see you again, especially you. Yeah, you know who you are. Midnight Radio is the first collection by the creative team of Ehud, Lavski, and Yael Nathan, creators who have been around for a while. In 2016, they started releasing short comics with dark twists that were reminiscent of the best Twilight Zone episodes. Personally, I stumbled across them when they started posting on Facebook, and to be honest, it was love at first sight. Every time they would post a new story, I would immediately read it, poring over every word, studying every image. Now, Ehud has been involved in many different projects over the years, including video games, comics, anthologies, movies. He's got a new one coming out later this year, and books. While Yael has her own webcomic series by the name of Serpent and is just absolutely gorgeous. She's done several covers for IDW Star Wars Adventures and most recently released the most gorgeous portfolio of women warriors. The two of them have also released a children's book, The Royal Crane, which looks amazing, but unfortunately I haven't been able to locate a copy anywhere. One of the things that I noticed in every comic, there's an immediacy and an intimacy that just grabs you. No matter how hard you try, you just cannot look away. While the stories are short, you still get the feeling that you know these characters. You understand that they're more than just illustrations and words on a page, although in at least one instance that's not exactly accurate. The stories all share at least one element as well, and that's the element of the fantastic. Whether it's dealing with the supernatural or demons, time travel, or even extraterrestrial elements, the same premise applies. Something outside the realm of everyday reality forces its will upon the characters, and they have to respond to this shift in reality for better or worse. Now, I'm not going to cover every story in this collection, but there's enough there to whet any appetite. Collecting the first 15 stories, Midnight Radio starts off innocuously, if slightly sinisterly, with the title story of a young woman who is one of many who hears a strange radio station and is eventually compelled to find the source with surprising results. Test, one of the most intense stories in the entire collection, finds a jailhouse guard forced into a confrontation with a man who is much much more than he seems. And the fate of the entire world hinges on decisions made between these two entities. Slash hug, which is internet slang for an emotion that you can do in a massive online role-playing game, asks the awful question, what happens to the characters of an MMORPG in their last moments before their servers are shut off for the last time? What if a player had developed a soft spot for an NPC who had no idea of what was going to happen? Sometimes siblings can be jerks to each other, often late at night when they're supposed to be sleeping. Sometimes all it results in is your parents yelling at you. Other times something dangerous puts an end to the shenanigans. The story details this and has not only been animated by a fan, but is also the beginning of the trilogy The Day the Earth Ended. A trilogy of stories that run through the book. Now, body horror is often a popular form of terrifying folks, and the signal is no different. Is it possible for frequencies to precipitate an evolution in human physicality? What would we look like if such a thing would happen? So, when certain items become all the rage, people will sometimes go to extraordinary lengths to get on the bandwagon. The second story in The Day the Earth Went Away trilogy finds an older Joey with his friends making a literal deal with a devil for a gaming system. But will the cost be too much for them? Now, deconstruction is a form of literary examination that seeks to examine the relationships between text and meaning. It's a fascinating way of examining the interplay of words and their meanings, but what if that concept was applied to an actual couple in an actual apartment that they had just moved into? And every time they went through a door, reality was a little less. Horror, unrelenting horror, doesn't work. There always has to be something to break up the continual onslaught of fear and depredation. So humor is often the best go-to in horror because it breaks the tension, often leading up to an even bigger scare. In this case, Kurzweil's time machine is just the salve needed to break that tension. Don't get me wrong, this is not a knee-slapping humor story, as that would ruin the flow of the anthology. But the unexpected finish to it is just sinister enough to keep the theme of danger running high. And to be honest, out of all the stories, this one is by far and away my absolute favorite. And the final story in Midnight Radio is also the final story in the Day the Earth Went Away trilogy, which finds a post-the Nintendo gang facing off against the entities that forever altered Joey's life. Following one last lead, Joey and the gang's lives will be forever altered after a visit to one of the most haunted houses in their town. So, Midnight Radio started out as a Kickstarter project, and in the spirit of full disclosure, I jumped on that like a starving man on a pork chop. The book itself is a beautiful hardback with an embossed cover, and it also shipped with a stunning bookmark and coloring book. There's the bookmark right there. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous, but I don't know where my coloring book went. Reading through this, it's not hard to see why this is such a compelling read. Ehud's command of storytelling and pacing is phenomenal. In a minimum of words, entire worlds are created only to be ripped apart by elements beyond our control. Coupling this with Yael's artwork only reinforces the terror, horror, humor, and dare I say, the love that is present within these pages. These illustrations don't feel like images on a sheet. No, these are more akin to hand-drawn reproductions of living, breathing entities that were captured on film. A look of pensive concern on a face tells you more in one panel than 5 pages of print ever could. That's what you have to look forward to in this collection. And while Ehud and Yael are not in the least bit shy about sharing their works, I mean, you can find all their stories all over the web and on their website. Trust me, I would still implore you to buy a copy of their book. Yes, I know, at first blush, it seems a little steep for one book. However, you have to consider this. A trip to the movie theater could easily run you $60 to $70 in entry and concessions. Plays are now being live streamed, so you might be able to save a couple dollars there. But the downside is that technology has its own downsides, and bars or nightclubs will quickly run you through your money, and probably half the time you're going home disappointed. The other thing about these forms of entertainment, you can only experience them once. If you want to do so again, you have to put out more money to have a similar experience. And the setting is often fixed to one specific location, be it a movie theater or a playhouse or a bar. A book, however, doesn't have those limitations. You can take it anywhere you want to go. You can also share it with others and thereby increase their enjoyment as well. So, I'm telling you, from a professional standpoint, just do it, okay? Buy the book. If you're feeling especially froggy, get the deluxe package with the coloring book and bookmark. Well, that's all I've got for this episode of The Graphic Reader. I would like to give a quick shout out to Yael Nathan, who was kind enough to indulge me audio clips of the proper enunciation and names, in addition to all the amazing work done on the book. I apologize. I've listened to those things a million times. I still probably butchered you folks' names. I'm sorry. I'd also like to thank the streamers Savage Steve and Mr. McStache for moral support, the upgraded logo, and just being there when I needed you. And finally, more importantly than anything else, I want to thank my support group, at Mayhem Central. You folks are the reason we have succeeded at so many things, and I love you all dearly. And as always, let me know what you think of this episode by leaving a message below. If you liked what you saw, give it a thumbs up. If you want to become one of my dear friends, subscribe. If you know someone who would enjoy this video, please share it. So, this is Nathan with The Graphic Reader saying, if your radio starts playing haunting music you've never heard before, you may want to think twice before tracking it down. It could be a matter of life